Hi, everybody. Adrian Fuentes here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
We're expecting a special guest today, and that is Ylenia Aguilar. And she is running for the Arizona Corporation Commission because of her lifelong commitment to tackling the most significant challenges faced by Arizonans, such as education, water, and healthcare. She's armed with a deep understanding of the everyday struggles of her fellow citizens. She seeks to empower consumers by championing transparency, accountability, and fair treatment in all corporate dealings. She aspires to embody the values of integrity, transparency, and accountability, serving as a reliable advocate for the people of Arizona within the Arizona Corporation Commission.
Thank you. I am really glad to be with you guys here today. I have lived in a lot of different places in our state. Mostly I grew up in Tucson, and I have spent more of my time as an adult in Phoenix now, but childhood here in Tucson, and I'm formally undocumented, so I got to attend more than 20 schools. That's all combined because I was moving a lot from Tucson to Phoenix and Mexico City, where my dad lives. And I'm just grateful that I had great quality teachers who encouraged me to continue to pursue my education. And I will say that I am a result of the amazing community that I grew up in. If it wasn't teachers, I had great friends who had parents that always supported me. So I'm glad to be here. In 2016, I got to vote for the first time ever. And for myself, I won my election on the school board where my kids were attending. They're now 20 and 16, so junior in high school and junior in college. And that was the first time I voted ever. So I had never been civically engaged prior to that because, usually the political system doesn't engage you if you're not a high efficacy voter or an engaged voter. And since then, I have been serving. I served for 7 years on the school board. And then from there, I got elected to the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board, which is where I currently serve. I don't have to step down because it is a volunteer position similar to the school board. We don't get paid. And it's been an honor to serve in those capacities. I will say that life prepared me for these positions. I am not an expert in education. I'm not an expert in water. And I'm not coming to you to say that I'm an expert in energy, although we don't just regulate electricity, we regulate telecommunications, natural gas, and 350 of the private water companies. I am definitely someone who cares deeply about our state, about our community. And when I was encouraged to run for this position, the first 4 months I said no. But then as I thought about the impacts of the Corporation Commission on my community and all community, because this impacts everyone in our state, I thought about the families like mine who right now cannot catch up with the cost of living, the increasing rents, the increasing cost of food, and medication, and how they're going to have to deal with the increase in rates in electricity bills. And that's something that motivated me because I am driven by service. Prior to being elected in 2016, I served for 15 years as an interpreter in the federal courthouse and the prisons in Florence, where they house undocumented people. So, and after that, once I got elected, I worked on advocacy, whether it was advocacy in education, advocating for the repeal of English only, or advocating for the elimination of flavors in tobacco, or advocating for clean drinking water in our tribal communities in Navajo, Hopi, in our colonias, which are unincorporated areas along the U.S.-Mexico border where communities lack the infrastructure and clean drinking water. I travel the state for all of that work. I've been a consultant since then, working on advocacy and policy. So traveling our states, just meeting with our communities and learning about their issues. And, we're talking about lack of clean drinking water in those areas, but then we also have areas in our rural Arizona, areas where they're living off of dry drinking wells. So there's many various issues with our water throughout our state, whether it's just the lack of access to the infrastructure.
Ylenia, if I could give you a little segue here. You're participating as a clean elections candidate. Can you tell us how we can help you?
Yes. So I would love your support if you're able to make a contribution of $5 to my campaign. I am very close to meeting my 1,500 fives, so I can get the 20. It's 250,000 approximately. It's not exact on the amount, but 250,000 for the 1,500 fives that I will submit. So we're pretty close. If anyone can make a contribution, I will add my link at the end of the conversation, but it's www.aguilar, Aguilar, for Arizona, FOR, Arizona.com. And I'd love to earn your support and trust. I'm here again asking for your support. This is a race that we can't win just alone. I live in Maricopa County. With the support of Maricopa County, I need everyone's support, and it's really going to take a lot of education, not just you guys attending this meeting, but you educating your neighbors, your family members about the importance of this race, because it really, I'm going from needing 4,000 on the school board to 400,000 on the water conservation to needing 1,650,000 votes throughout our state. So I would, love to answer any questions, and really excited.
Yeah, could you mention what the site is that we can go on and give the $5 for your campaign?
Yeah, so you can go on the Clean Elections Fund site. You can go where you signed equal our petitions to help us qualify, and thank you again for helping me qualify. I know you helped Jonathan and Joshua as well. We are the 3 Democrats running. We need to get the 3 of us who are all on the ballot, so please vote for all 3 of us. We need more than one person on the seat. Ana Tovar is the only Democrat serving right now, and it's impossible to get anything done without 3 votes. 3 Democrats running, so please vote for all 3 of us. And it is equal, or my website, my personal website, which is Aguilar, my last name, for Arizona spelled out.com.
Great. Well, hey, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. Everyone, please, if you haven't given $5 to Ylenia, it's very easy to do. Equal is the site. And I heard you're kind of real close to getting the number we need.
I haven't checked because I've been working all day, so I don't know what the numbers are. Like, usually our team doesn't work on, my campaign manager was off this weekend, so I don't really know, but I probably
I heard 30.
Can get me.
I heard it's less than 30. Yeah.
Less than 30.
Right.
Well, let's give Ylenia a big warm round of applause for coming today. And
we're going to take that Arizona Climate Commission this year. God dang it.
Ylenia, we would love to have you stay, but we also know that you've probably got some other things to do. So
thank you. You
take good care. Okay, we also have a special guest running for Congress, Kurt Kroemer, in CD1. He's running in a field of 6 Democratic candidates to defeat incumbent Republican David Schweikert and help Democrats take control of the U.S. House. He has served as a successful senior executive in several organizations, including senior vice president at the American Red Cross, chief executive officer of the Arizona and New Mexico region, of the ARC and Chief Operating Officer of the Make-A-Wish Foundation in America and Humanity United. He also served in Congress for over 10 years as a congressional investigator with 2 top secret clearance and is a 2-time city councilman. He also serves as Chief Operating Officer and worked overseas for organizations dedicated to ending genocides, mass atrocities, and human trafficking, as well as social impact work in developing communities. His entire life has been dedicated to helping others. Let's give a warm welcome to our guest, Kurt Kroemer.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Kurt.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this big time. So thanks for the opportunity. Quick background in case you don't know, right? Obviously, there are 6 of us running on the Democratic side against David Schweikert. This was the 6th closest race, congressional race in the entire country. David Schweikert won by a little over 3,000 votes. So this one, Kirsten Engels and a few others are literally going to decide which party controls the House of Representatives. And as all of you know, controlling the House is super important, especially if you look ahead 6-7 months from now. We are on all sorts of fiscal cliffs around the debt, the deficit, Trump's taxes. Are those going to get renewed or not? The tax cuts that he put in place. And so controlling the House is absolutely essential. The other day I was on a podcast, and someone that was moderating, I was giving my life story and what I want to try to achieve in Congress. And they said, you sound like an idealist. And they actually meant it as a compliment. And I said, well, I don't think about what is. I think about what should be and what could be. And I am really, I'm trying to change the narrative, the entire conversation that we're having in this country. We don't talk enough about fundamentally changing some of the things that are in place right now. 1 out of every 5 kids in this country lives in poverty. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates of any developed country, right? We have gross income inequality. We have millions of people without insurance, health insurance, right? Our kids go to school fearing gun violence. This is fundamentally wrong. And I think we have to change the narrative and get back to, what are we here for? Why are we trying to help each other out? And how do all of us benefit if all of us benefit? I have spent, just real quickly, I have spent most of my life helping people in their darkest hour. I worked in Africa to end genocides and mass atrocities. So I've literally been in rebel-held territory, meeting with a war criminal to try to understand what could happen whereby he and his troops would put down their arms. Very dangerous situation. I spent the last several years working along the border as the CEO of the Red Cross here for the southwest part of the country. And on the border, working to provide humanitarian relief to immigrants and asylum seekers. I've had meetings with Customs and Border Protection and INS and all these other folks to try to get them to put in place programs that would help us to alleviate some of the suffering that was going on along the border. I led the Red Cross response to the mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. So when people talk about gun violence, I've been in the room with the FBI, with the families, as they're being notified that their loved ones aren't coming home. I've been in that room. And I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. And it is outrageous to me that we have a country where I have to go to some place with a bunch of other nonprofits to help 50, 60 families because they've lost their loved ones to gun violence. That's beyond outrageous. And so I could go on and on. I've worked in the Dominican Republic to help folks get clean water and housing, work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So sometimes there's joy, right? So Make-A-Wish Foundation, we're granting wishes to these kids with life-threatening illnesses. But again, I spent 6 years doing that. And so my life has been about helping people. And I think we need to send more helpers to Congress. We got a lot of people in Congress that seem to be in it for themselves and for power, literally just for power's sake. And that's simply never been my motivation. And I can beat David Schweikert. I know I can beat him. There's no doubt in my mind he is exceedingly vulnerable. And this is our chance to take him down. So I'd like to open it up to questions, comments. If you all, the moderators, if you've got some specific topics you'd like me to go into, I am a policy wonk. So I can dive as deep as you want or not.
You mentioned that you can beat Schweikert in a general election contest. Are there candidates that are running for the Democratic nomination who, in your view, cannot beat him in the general election, and why would you think they couldn't?
Yeah, I have tried very, very hard to have this campaign as a positive campaign and to not, in air quotes, go negative, right? But there are some of the other candidates, I'll say that there's baggage, and this is going to get ugly. This is probably a $10 million general election campaign.
Yeah.
Hakeem Jeffries, his super PAC just announced they were going to put $5 million into this race. And the other side's going to do the same thing. And I can write the commercials and I can write the advertisements for Schweikert against some other folks that are running on the Democratic side, fairly or unfairly, right? How is David Schweikert or the Republicans going to come after me? You're going to come after me because I was a senior executive at the Red Cross? I mean, good luck with that. Have a ball. Or that I was
hard liberal.
Yeah. Like, I'm out helping people. Bring that on. I think the other piece is that now he was unwilling to debate in the last election, the Democratic nominee for the general election. He wasn't willing to debate. But if he did, there is no doubt in my mind that, pardon my French, but I would tear him apart. I would tear him a new one, because if it came to a debate and it came down to questions around the economy, questions around national security, questions around healthcare, questions, I'll eviscerate him. And we've had a couple of debates among the Democratic candidates, and I've gotten lots of feedback that suggests that I did fairly well in those in those circumstances. I wish there was a debate every day, if I could be king for a day, because then you can educate the voters, and the voters can then look and hear and see what does the candidate know that's important, right? That's absolutely important. And what is their experience? Why should they be there? I worked for Congress for 10 years. I did have a top secret clearance. I worked with all sorts of different committees and subcommittees. When I worked at the Red Cross headquarters, I was director of government relations. So even after I left the Hill, I spent the next 4 years advocating for the Red Cross on the Hill, again, up there all the time, working with all sorts of different groups to try to get pieces of legislation passed. I helped to get a $70 million appropriation out of Congress to help the Red Cross after Hurricane Katrina. Nobody else has done that. Nobody. I know how to do this. I've already done it.
Well, I can predict one thing about the general election race, and that is Schweikert is going to lean heavily into the immigration issue. And one of the things that I was very impressed with watching the debate was your willingness and ability to push back on this narrative that there's some sort of crisis at the border, which some of your debate opponents were not willing to do, and it conceded that MAGA talking point that the border's in crisis. Can you talk about that somewhat? Why don't you think the border's in crisis, and what do you think needs to be done to address the perennial issue that we've been having with immigration for the past forever, basically?
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, I'm probably preaching to everybody's choir here, but look, why don't we have in air quotes, comprehensive immigration reform. And I don't even think that's the right term to use, but be that as it may. The Republicans don't want any kind of action along the border around immigration because that's their cudgel. If they didn't have that issue, what would they run on? I mean, there's literally nothing else that I can think of that they would run on. And so, but I see Democrats do it all the time. The minute this comes up, the initial response is, yes, I agree. We need to secure the border. Yes, we need to do that, and so on and so forth. When you do that, you cede the entire issue to them. Look, we actually need more immigrants. We literally need more immigrants. If you, yeah. Well, if you look at the demographics of this country over the next 10, 15, 20 years, the only way, literally the only way the economy grows is we have to have more immigrants coming into the country, because our birth rate is just lower among native-born Americans. It just is, right? That's point one. Point two, these things can be solved. So you look at right now, many of the folks coming across the border, when they're coming across in areas where there isn't a legal port of entry, they're often crossing because they've been waiting at some legal port of entry, and they've been waiting there 6-7 months, or they've been at some camp inside of Mexico waiting for this and that and the other thing. And so at some point, they say, we have to, I have to go across because my family right now in Mexico is at risk. So what we need, this is not that difficult. We do need more immigration courts and immigration judges so that when someone raises their hand and says, I am seeking asylum, that those cases are adjudicated more quickly, right? It takes 6 years, 5 to 6 years to get your case adjudicated. And fortunately or unfortunately, 90% of the people who have their cases adjudicated are actually deported. They don't win their case for a variety of different reasons, but you could speed up the process along the border in terms of the immigration process, right? 2, we have a huge backlog of green card applications. These are people that are coming in trying to get a work visa, right? They've passed all the different things to at least get that far. And now they're sitting in some place. These are folks we need to come into the country. And they can't get here because it's taking 2-3 years to get a green card application processed. And I could go on, but it's these are easily solvable. And the worst thing we can do as Democrats, well, as Americans, is to vilify people who are coming here often under threats of violence. That's inhumane.
Okay, Susie Anderson has her hand up.
My question is, how do you talk to people who don't listen and believe their gut over their brain?
That is that's the $64,000 question. And so I've knocked on 14,000 doors, literally, me personally. No other candidate is close to that. And I've been knocking on independents and Democrats. And as you can imagine, every once in a while, my app is wrong or something, and a staunch, MAGA Republican will answer the door. And I actually want to have that conversation. So I've had several. And here's what I've concluded, and maybe right or wrong. There is a certain percentage, and I would say it's 20 to 25% that are gone. We have 20 to 25% of the American population that is gone. They are never coming back. All right. They are part of a cult. And so if you tell them 2 + 2 is 4, they're going to say it's 5. And no matter what you do, they're going to believe it's 5 until they die. And so for me, I think at some point we have to accept the fact that they believe it's 5, and we are wasting our precious energy trying to talk to those folks. I mean, I think it's 20, 25%. Then there's another percentage, though, maybe it's another 15 to 20% that are persuadable. And I try to start with, so where can we agree? So, and I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, well, would you agree that we don't want children killed with automatic weapons in their school? Could we agree that that's probably not a good thing? And, you know, nobody raises their hand and says, oh, no, I think that's probably a good thing. Okay, so we agree on that. Now let's talk about work back on what might be some of the solutions around that. Or do you agree that everyone should have health care? Or do you literally just, I mean, I've met very few people that have raised their hand and said, no, I don't think people should have, everybody shouldn't have health care. So if you can find the place first where you agree on the outcome, then it's just a conversation around what's the process to get there. And of course, that becomes difficult. But I have found that to be a little more effective and more engaging. And then they're open to the possibility that there's another way to think about this. And so that's what I've tried to do, but I'm not going to waste my time. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene today, they had a hearing with Dr. Fauci around the COVID pandemic. And Marjorie Taylor Greene today got up and said something about Dr. Fauci should be, there should be crimes against humanity against Dr. Fauci. That this is just intellectual dishonesty. And so that's a waste. She's gone. You are gone. Goodbye. And the way we win these races, because my race, I can't win with just Democrats. We have to get some independents. But on all these doors I've knocked, and I'm not kidding, out of the 14,000 doors, some, you know, several thousand are independents. There's not a single independent who has said to me they're voting for Trump. The vast majority have said, I used to be a Republican, I'm now registered independent, and I'm voting Democrat for the first time in my life, over and over and over. And so these independents are absolutely persuadable. Mm-hmm. And that's how we were in, you know, Kirsten Engel's race, this race, and the presidency and everything else.
Okay, and Steve Linder has a question.
Hi, I guess it's somewhat related to Susie's last question. What are you up against as far as the differential between registrations in your district, as far as Republicans, independents, and Democrats? And the second part of my question is, where is Schweikert in MAGA land as far as being accepted? Because he doesn't seem to be as vocal as and insane as Gosar or Crane. I mean, you know, out there. So really, what are you up against as far as registration and his MAGA support?
Yeah, so it's about 35% independent, 33% Republican, 31% Democratic. He used to have an easy race into Congress, and then because of the 2020 redistricting, it's almost like a third, little more independents and Republicans. But again, he only won by 3,000 votes, so that's why this is one of the swingiest of the swing districts. In terms of his MAGA-ness, so I will give David Schweikert one tiny little bit of credit in that he's just as MAGA as Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and you know, Matt Gaetz and all the others. He's just quieter about it. So he votes 95% of the time the same as Marjorie Taylor Greene. He voted for a nationwide abortion ban. He's voted a bill that would fundamentally get rid of IVF. Right. He voted against the Women's Protection Act. He's voted to, you know, eviscerate Social Security and Medicare. So his voting record is massively extreme. And that's one of the things my campaign has been out communicating is don't be fooled by the quieter guy. And he's starting to backtrack, like, you know, all the stuff that's been going on with the abortion issue here in the state. And the minute he saw the tea leaves, he starts, you know, doing the backstroke, walking backwards and say, well, you know, I'm not really, you know, for a nationwide abortion ban, da, 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 da. And no, you're not getting away with that. The other thing he's done, which drives me crazy, is, and you've seen this with other Republicans, he takes credit for some of the work that the Biden administration has accomplished. So whether it's the Infrastructure Act or there was an act to help veterans with health care. So he voted against this one particular bill that helped veterans with health care. It passed. And then he sent a thing out to all of his constituents. Hey, if you're a veteran, come over here and this is how you apply to get additional health benefits through this PACT Act. And I called him out on it. I said, wait a minute, you voted against that, right? And now you're touting its the good things it's going to do for your constituents. I mean, geez, talk about the height of taking advantage of things when you don't deserve to do that.
We need a whole new definition for like hypocrisy that goes beyond the pale of shame.
Oh, it is, and it is really, and I'm sure you all think about this, is that, if I got caught lying, I would feel shame. I'd be embarrassed, right? I just would. I don't know. It's something that's almost human, right? And yet we have all these people on the other side who literally don't care that they get caught lying, and it's almost a badge of honor. Like, what gene is missing there where they don't feel that embarrassment? But it's sad, right? There's no moral compass there. And that's why this country is in such danger, is because many Americans, whether we like it or not, they have lost their moral compass. That's the danger. That's why democracy is in peril right now.
Okay. Mike, do you have another question or?
I see another major area of vulnerability for us this year, and it's reflected in Republican messaging, and that's that the economy is still problematic. That inflation is still too high, and it is a bit above Fed targets, but it's not much above Fed targets. It's come down quite a bit. We're doing pretty well. I want to hear your message about what we Democrats have done in order to help rebuild the economy from the shambles we were left from COVID, and what we can do to help those people who still, rightly or wrongly, and in many cases, quite rightly, still feel like this economy is leaving them behind and they're not making the progress they'd like to make for them and their families.
Yeah, I think the first thing, if you sort of walk backwards from sort of this logical progression. So, one of the things I point out is that under the Biden administration, 8 million jobs have been created, 8 million. So let's think for a second. Let's just pause for 2 seconds. What would it be like right now if 8 million people didn't have a job, right? So these 8 million people have a job. This is a good thing. There are 8 million jobs that were created under the Biden administration. That's point one. Point two, most of the inflation, and there have been academic studies done on this, about 65 to 70% of the inflation has been a result of two things. There were the supply chain disruptions that are slowly working their way through, and then corporate profit taking. That is a huge piece of the puzzle of why we still have inflation above the Fed target. If you look at many, many corporations, they have achieved record corporate profits, not just record revenue, record profits. And then what do they do with those profits? They don't plow it back into their workers with higher wages and better health care and so on and so forth. They do stock buybacks. And I will have a conversation with anybody about the deleterious impact of stock buybacks if we want to get into that, right? So that's why we continue to have this gross income inequality. When some CEO, and again, I mean, this isn't just Democratic talking points. This is a true thing. This is why people are struggling. I use the example of my best friend. His parents were two teachers, just teachers, and they had a very nice house. They had a cottage on the lake. They had a boat. They had two nice cars. Completely middle class, two teachers. Today, depending on what state you live in, there are teachers that are eligible to get SNAP benefits, food stamps. This is back to my conversation about something is terribly amiss, that we have teachers that are eligible for food stamps. We have flight attendants that are eligible for food stamps because they're not making enough money. In the last, it's not necessarily the last thing, but the whole inflation rate. The other thing I point out is, guess what the average inflation rate has been over the last 60 years in our country? 3.6%. 3.6% is the average over the past 60 years. Today, it's 3.4%. So we have a lower inflation rate today than the average over the past 60 years. Of course, we've had inflation, super high, 15%, and we've had negative inflation with deflation, but this is not unusual to have 3.6% inflation. The problem is that the folks at the lower end of the income strata working 1, 2, 3 jobs literally still can't make enough to be able to pay their bills, just pay their bills and take care of their kids and put food on the table. That's what Democrats are trying to change, so that that's not the case. We got rid of childhood poverty during the pandemic, literally, because we increased the earned income tax credit for children. If we want to get wonky about this, we basically got rid of childhood poverty, and then that increase in the child tax credit went away, and now the children, the poverty rate of children increases again.
And why did it go away, Kurt?
Because Republicans wouldn't allow it to come back up again for a vote so that it could continue, right? This was not Democrats saying, oh, I don't want this to happen. So there's very simple things. If we just did that, we made the earned income tax credit permanent, we would virtually get rid of childhood poverty, right? We hire more immigration judges, and we speed up the process there. We speed up the process for green cards. We have legal ports of entry where people are coming across at an appropriate rate with technology. Like, these things get solved. They want to make it complicated.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not complicated.
It's choice. I mean, you can choose Republicans and their continuation of Trump's $1 trillion tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, or you can, put us in charge and we'll do the child tax credit and take every child in the United States out of poverty.
Well, let me give you another example.
Choice.
Yeah, universal pre-K education. See, this is where I get wonky. Like, I love this stuff, but pre-K education. We could provide pre-K education to every child in this country for $35 billion.
That's nothing.
The Trump tax cuts were $3 trillion. We could just take a smidgen of the Trump tax cuts, and it would pay for universal pre-K education for every child in this country. This is what my campaign is about. We're making these. We Americans are making these choices, and then in my mind, they're immoral.
Sandy Binion would like to know what the boundaries of your congressional district are roughly, so that people will know when they watch this video whether or not they're able to vote for you.
Yeah. So it's basically, if you know Phoenix, if you happen to know the Phoenix area, it's all of Scottsdale. It's all of the town of Fountain Hills. It goes all the way up to a place, Cave Creek and Carefree, about a third of Phoenix itself, Phoenix proper. And so it's basically the northeast quadrant of Maricopa County area. Yeah. And it is, as you can imagine, it's demonstrably white. It's fairly middle upper class. There clearly are places that are not. It's a moderate district in terms of politics. Again, the third kind of thing in registration. So yeah, that's the district.
Boy, Kurt, I really like your focus on how we really need folks that are migrating who can really help with our labor pool. And I think you've got a great prescription there for how we could reform immigration. Have you looked at all at the E-Verify system? Is that still working? Is it viable?
Yeah, from what I understand, I mean, it's a viable process and for the most part, but the problem sometimes is it does, in fact, it will sometimes flag people as not documented, not able to work in the country, and it's wrong. So it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And then the other piece to it is sort of, again, I think the right question is, right, we have all sorts of 24% of all the people that work in construction are undocumented. Something like 35 to 40% of all the people that work in agriculture are undocumented. And so why is that? It's because we don't provide easy work visas where somebody, if whatever country they're from, right, they could come over, they could work here for 6, 7, 8 months. And often they're remitting money back to their families. And I do remember a time when Alabama tried to shut down all of this, where they weren't allowing any folks working in the agricultural sector that were completely documented. And within 6 months, the Alabama legislature changed the law because all the Alabama farmers were screaming and yelling like, we can't find anybody to do the work in our fields. I mean, it's a stereotype, sort of, but it's a true thing, and it really happened. So in this deep red state, this was maybe 10, 12 years ago, they tried to do this kind of thing, and it doesn't work, and B, I think we have these wrong arguments. I don't find anything inherently wrong with a bunch of folks coming to our country to do work and help themselves and their families. And we need those people to fill a lot of these different jobs. And I don't care, even engineering. Like when I was working for Humanity United, I had to bring in somebody from England who was an expert in Sudan, because we couldn't find anybody in the US that had the real detailed knowledge of that space. And it took forever to get her to whereby she could work for our entity. But so it's, I don't want to just focus on agriculture or construction. I mean, it's STEM positions and everything else. It's everything. And we just seed this. We run away from it. I want to run toward it. I could go on, but it's amazing to me, especially you look at the people that scream the loudest. You go and look, and their parents came over 20 years ago, right? And now they're screaming and yelling.
Yeah,
My grandfather was an Italian shoemaker, all right? And he came over in the 1920s or whatever it was. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that.
absolutely. Well, very well said. I really appreciated your analysis on inflation. And I think the most important part of your analysis was the end. The folks that are having a real hard time making ends meet and putting food on the table and paying their bills. The macro numbers don't impact them like they might somebody who has investments and things like that. But when you bring it right down, we need to feel the pain of the folks that are really struggling. And so when we talk about inflation at 3.2 and it was 3.4, and what they know is what they're paying for a basket of groceries. And so I really think, President Biden can call up emotion. He really can. I think he needs to call up more emotion with those families that, Bill Clinton had it right. First of all, it was the economy stupid. and secondly, it was, I feel your pain. And, that's got to be part of our messaging.
Well, you think about where, you think we got problems now. Wait 10, 20 years. Half of the people in this country have no money in the stock market. Half the people, they have zero. They have no mutual fund, no 401k, no IRA, no nothing. 50% of the people. So what's going to happen when those folks get to retirement age? go ahead and try to live just on a Social Security check. And so these are massive macroeconomic problems we're having. If you get down to the root cause, it's this gross income inequality. If the federal minimum wage, I'm such a wonky guy. If the federal minimum wage had kept pace with inflation, the federal minimum wage today would be like $22 an hour. And it's like, what, $7.95? $7.95 20 years ago, I don't know, maybe at the time, if you'd worked a job and your spouse worked a job, maybe you could make a living on that. I don't know. But you certainly can't do it today.
That's right.
And so we haven't kept up with inflation just in terms of how we pay our folks.
Absolutely. Susie Anderson's back with us. Susie, you have a question.
Thank you. Kurt, not every one of the immigrants is unskilled. Some of them have great skills, and yet they have to jump through all kinds of hoops in order to become qualified to practice whatever their skill is. That is a problem. I mean, it's a good thing that, we have ways to make sure that they have the correct skills, even though they were educated in a foreign country. Can you speak to that?
Right. We have a teacher shortage. We have a nursing shortage. We actually have a doctor shortage in many parts of the country. And again, we make choices along the way to determine and decide how hard are we going to make it for somebody from another country who's a nurse to come here, get a green card, H-1B visa or whatever it might be, and start working. We make it so hard. And then we complain, right? When we get to the doctor and, it takes an hour to see the doctor or a PA or whatever. Yeah, because we don't have enough people, right? And so they're seeing 10 zillion patients and they don't have the capacity to deal with it. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just these, and that's why I hate to, it is almost stereotyping, like, and it's agriculture and construction and landscaping. It is across the economy. We have a labor shortage in a lot of areas. We have 8 million job openings in this country, 6 million people looking for a job. So even if every single person who's looking for a job got a job, we'd still have 2 million job openings. This is solvable, right? It is choices that we make all the time that I think are just, I mean, they're intellectually stupid, but they're also just bad for our country.
I would like to know about, your foreign policy experience seems deeper than a lot of the other candidates. And so I'm wondering if you have perspectives that you'd like to share about our national security situation moving into the future. We obviously have this big crisis with in Gaza right now. We have a huge crisis with Russian aggression against Ukraine. And of course, we have an increasingly belligerent and assertive China. How do you feel about those areas? And are there other areas that you've identified that you're concerned about into the future?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So we've probably had 7 or 8 different debates among the Democratic nominees for this race. Not a single question has been given to us about national security or international affairs. That's not a good thing. So I have a master's degree in international affairs, right? I wrote my master's thesis was on civil conflict in developing countries. I mentioned I worked in Africa to end genocides and mass atrocities. We did work in Southeast Asia to deal with human trafficking. I worked in Cuba and the Dominican Republic. And again, even some of the work I did in Congress with most of my investigations were in the national security space. I literally looked into whether Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons or not in the first Persian Gulf War. Like, that was one of my investigations. So this is a space, that I know, and I clearly I am more qualified in this space than any other candidate by far in this particular race. What I would say is a couple of things. And again, people, I've been watching this, and nobody wants to speak the truth. And that's what I have always said. This is what I believe. You're going to agree with me sometimes, not agree with me others, but I'm going to tell you how I feel about these things. And so, right, let's go to, the situation in Gaza. What I say to folks, look, Hamas is a terrorist organization. None of this would have happened if Hamas had not invaded Israel and killed, 1,200 people or whatever it is, right? We would not be having this conversation if Hamas had not done that. So let's start with that precept. That is a factual statement. Now, and Israel, under international law, has a right to go after Hamas, because that is another area. My background was actually in international law. So I can quote line and verse around the Geneva Conventions and the rules of armed conflict. So Israel has a right to go after Hamas. What I will say, it cannot, I don't think it can be argued that Israel, through its actions over the past several months, has not violated some of the tenets of international law and international humanitarian law. They have. Okay? They have. And now Hamas has done it, on steroids. Okay? But both parties have violated international humanitarian law, international law, and the rules of armed conflict. And those are three actually separate things. So, what we need, what I'm proposing right now is, we have a temporary ceasefire because we need to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. I mean, there are millions of people, 1 to 3 million people that are on the brink of starvation and so on and so forth. So we need to have a temporary ceasefire. I do believe that Hamas, the militant part of Hamas, needs to be eliminated. Hamas, the ideology, you're not going to get rid of in any short period of time. That's not a thing. Okay, this has been going on for centuries. And so, when Netanyahu says, well, we're going to get rid of Hamas, what do you mean by that? So, but temporary ceasefire, humanitarian assistance, and then I believe the international community needs to make sure that the military part of Hamas doesn't exist anymore. They're a terrorist organization. When it comes to Ukraine and Russia, I am a strong supporter of Ukraine. When people complain about the billions of dollars we're sending in military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, multiply that about 7 zillion fold if Russia continues its westward march to reinvigorate the Soviet Union. You will be spending a lot more money and a lot more American lives. And you have to, at some point, you have to stand up for the rules of international order. And the rules of international order say a sovereign nation cannot just go and attack some other sovereign nation. That's not a thing. It's not allowed. And so I believe we absolutely should be supporting Ukraine. And I agree with Biden that he recently said, he gave Ukraine the ability to fire weaponry into parts of Russia. I am okay with that. So those are two things. I think the other piece is the broader thing is there is a march of authoritarianism around the world, right? We've all sat around the past 20 years and said, oh, this liberal world order, and it's inexorable. It's going to happen. Nothing is inexorable. Democracy is not guaranteed.
Not even here.
Not even here by a lot, right? But we've proven that. And so, and you see it in Hungary, you see it in Turkey, you see it in Venezuela, you see it in lots of places, a lot of countries in Africa that I'm most familiar with, where there have been several military coups d'etats in North Africa over the past 2 years, and authoritarians have taken over. And that might be the biggest threat. I mean, we have all these individual things, but what it is it's the world order is at risk. And I think I'd rather live under democracy than an autocracy. I don't know. I'm kind of weird that way.
This may be a topic you haven't addressed at all in your mind, but being in international relations and work that you've done, do you think strengthening the Peace Corps would help with solving, partially at least, the immigration problem?
Yeah, one of the things that if you go to my website, and I've got this one tab that has my policy positions and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we absolutely need to do is fully fund the State Department, the Agency for International Development, entities like the Peace Corps, because again, diplomacy is a heck of a lot cheaper than going to war.
Yeah.
And I have seen it, and I'm a firm believer in, ensuring we have a strong diplomatic corps. I mean, look at what Trump was doing and what the Republicans want to do around funding for some of these agencies. It's penny wise and pound foolish, point one. And two, again, it's intellectually infantile. I don't know what world they literally don't understand how the world works. I mean, as silly as that may sound. And so, yeah, I mean, these are the things that promote better understanding and relationships and so on and so forth. When I was in Cuba, right, it's interesting. You sit around and you talk to the Cuban folks, and they talk to you. And we were working to try to come up with different ways that we could provide sort of some what I call social impact work there. And it was wonderful. And in fact, most of the Cubans, when you get them to a restaurant, they say, like, look, I understand where we are. I understand who Castro is. I don't like it. But they said, I remember one young woman said, but you know what? We also don't have some of the problems you guys have. Right? We don't have a lot of racial issues. We don't have gun violence. We have very good healthcare in Cuba. Like, everybody gets healthcare. And so that was, yeah, well, you know what? You got a point there. But, diplomacy first.
Okay, thanks, Craig. And Andrea Kennedy has a question.
And if you don't know the answer to this, that's fine. But in investigating what's been going on in the Mideast, there are other Muslim countries that support Hamas with weapons. What is their goal? If they want to destroy the state of Israel, why do they not give Hamas enough weapons to destroy the state of Israel? It's like they trickle in. I mean, I'm just puzzled as to what are they trying to accomplish?
That is a great question. Observation. And some of it is instability for instability's sake, right? Iran wants nothing more than there to be instability around the world, especially if it costs Americans a lot of money, right? And everything that we have to do. Same thing with Putin, right? And Xi in China. Instability is good for them, because then that starts to promote cracks in the international liberal world order. They don't like that. So it is instability for instability's sake. I mean, some of it is, religious in nature with some of the different entities. But you look, and it's like in some of these places, the Sunni and Shia actually work together when they have to against some common enemy. But I think it's also maybe that another piece to this is, it's not so easy to defeat Israel, because again, if something went really south there, then the United States and lots of other countries would start to intervene. And that's why the Iranians haven't done anything really themselves, because they understand they're not actually the most stable government in the whole, they have power and control. Do they have popular support in Iran? That's debatable. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but.
What good is it to be the most powerful country on earth if we can't go and say, hey, Bibi, cut the crap?
A lot of my moral compass comes from just things I've seen, right? So lots of folks have seen pictures of a child with a distended belly because they're starving. You've seen a picture of that? I've seen the child, right? And so it's personal to me, and I know the suffering that can go on in places, and it is horrific. And I think some of this, again, is a lack of courage, I think, on our part. And it may be Democrats and Republicans, because to say that we need a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire, is not saying that one doesn't support Israel, not only Israel's right to exist, but for Israel to prosper and everything else, right? Those are two separate things. Two things can be true at the same time. And you're right. I mean, I think we have leverage with the Israelis to again, the way that they are war is ugly, and the way that they're conducting the war, they are violating certain precepts of international law. And, to fight it under international law probably means more Israeli troops get killed, right? That would probably be a thing. But then if not, then how are we separating ourselves from the terrorist organizations? We can't act like the terrorist organization. I'm not saying Israel is acting like Hamas. I mean, that's not the same. It's not. But I think we should be exerting a little, some more pressure on Israel, again, at least around a temporary ceasefire. We have to take care of the civilian population, and it's not occurring. It's not occurring.
Absolutely. Well, what a vibrant meeting. As always, you Democrats of Greater Tucson ask a lot of great questions. Kurt, you are certainly up to the task. You are well prepared and everything thought through, and you listen very carefully to the questions. So we really appreciate that. On July 30th, the primary date, we're going to make sure we're keeping an eye on your race. And we wish you luck. And maybe when the dust settles again, we can have you back.
Well,
So,
thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody that's on here. You could be doing something else, and instead you're taking the time to do this. And that says a lot about you. It says a lot about who you are.
And then one last pitch about the $5 contributions for Ylenia Aguilar. Those $5 total up to thousands of dollars, but they're leveraged with clean election money to hundreds and thousands of dollars. And she and Jonathan Hill and Joshua Polachek, Joshua is running a traditional campaign. They need our help. If we're going to really be a blue state, we need to have that Arizona Corporation Commission blue. And it's been a long, long time since it's been blue.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.